Thanks everyone to tuning in to 89.1 The Word in Praise podcast. If you're not watching us, maybe you're listening to the audio. My name's Aaron, as always, and I'm joined today with Ben, who is the director and co-writer of the upcoming film Pastor's Kid. And we're also joined by a very special guest, Courtney, who is the star of the film.
Thank you.
Well, hello. Thank you for having us.
Yes,
Oh,
thanks for having us on,
welcome,
man.
welcome. Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay, I'm on
let's,
pins and
we're going to
needles.
go.
I'm on pins and needles to know your thoughts on this film. So we'll have to see. I'm excited to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for allowing me to screen the film. So for the audience, I've already seen the film. It's coming out March 15th.
Yes, we're in
Yes.
theaters nationwide March 15th. And hopefully if it's successful, it'll expand to some other cities. But yeah.
Okay. Um, and then this also is rated R. So just
Mhm.
a heads up for our viewers and our listeners. It's going to be an interesting conversation today because this film really hits on some very serious subject matter, some very real life topics and subject matters too. And you guys did not shy away from life in this film. You didn't water down the Christian story or the walk of a prodigal when you did this film. So I'm excited to get into all of that with you guys.
Awesome.
So let's hit on that first part. You know, it's rated R. Let's hit on even before that. Let me just
Yeah,
get it out
yeah.
of the way because I built the suspense with you guys. I did watch the film and I went in fact, it's on my notes here. I have 2 pages of notes that I wrote while I was watching the film. And the one line here that I think you'll like, Ben, is I went in a skeptic and I came out a supporter.
Oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Oh, good.
I
Uh,
love that.
so I went in a skeptic. You know, obviously, whenever you hear of, oh, yeah, here's a Christian film and it's rated R,
Mhm.
and I think most people think, okay, R like, other, Jesus movies where it's just like graphic violence,
Mhm.
things like that. But then you see what it's rated R for, and it's language and it's drug use. But then you see what the story is, and you go with the character on this journey of seeking pain, loss, reconciliation, redemption,
Mhm.
and by the end of it, you're like, okay, I was at least. I was okay. I get it. I get
Awesome.
it. And it's such a beautiful story. So this is based on a true story, right?
Yes, yes. So I worked for a church in Orange County, California called Mariners Church. And it was a friend of mine that I'd worked with for years. And for one Easter, we needed a testimony story. Like we were scrambling to find one for an Easter service. So she's like, "I've got a story. I'll film my story." So I'm the video guy, you know. So I record her story, and it's this journey that she told. And the whole time, I'm like, I had no idea this was your story. I had no idea this is what you had went through. And I just remember editing together her testimony the entire time. I was just bawling my eyes out because of how authentic she was. And basically, if I can just give a quick synopsis, is just basically her mom was an alcoholic, and so all growing up, this she had to raise her little brother as her mom was an alcoholic. Her mom then gets clean, becomes a Christian, and then becomes an executive pastor at a church. So she's handling kind of the business and the finance side of a church. So now all of a sudden, this woman who was an alcoholic is now praised as being this amazing conversion story. All the while, her daughter, who was with her along the way, no one ever saw her pain. No one ever saw what she went through. And so she said, in her testimony, she's like, so I did everything I could to push my mom away. I did everything I could to push God away, and I did everything to push the church away. And she goes, that got me into partying and drug deals, like in college. And eventually I was kind of hit with, there are these two roads I can continue with my life. What am I going to do? And she said, and I'll spoil it a little bit, but she said basically God eventually showed up to her, and she's like, there is a God who sees me and knows me and loves me completely. So what else can I do than to just give everything to him? And so when she shared that story with us, I felt like it's one of these things that everyone's been hurt by a Christian in some way, shape, or form, or they have experiences they could pull from of a rude or mean Christian. If you've been a Christian long enough, you've either been you've left a church or you've been burnt by a church in some way. You've had these experiences, and so I think people can relate to that kind of hypocrisy of religion in some ways. You know, the
Mhm.
church is made of people. You're going to see hypocrisy in some ways because it's made of people. But also the beauty of a relationship with God, and how God, like the one verse I keep going back to is that God leaves the 99 for the one. And
Mm.
when making this film, I felt like if we tried to sanitize her story, we lost the fact that God stepped into that darkness for her. And not that Christian films can't be family friendly, or that we shouldn't have that side, but I also think there's this space of, there are these raw R-rated testimonies that if we told them in a real way, could just bridge gaps in places that we're missing right now, or can make people feel more seen and heard, than when we PG everything, if that makes sense. So, not saying that every Christian film should be R-rated, but I think there's space for that now. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, no, and I felt that like just collectively as a culture that, we I think in general we want to stop pretending, or at least
mm,
we want to really see reality in what it's for, because it's just I'm just feeling it in the air. I don't know if it's just me, just in general. I just think the way everything's going, like we want to tell the truth.
yeah, yeah. Tired
Yeah.
of the fake. Even you can even play that
Yeah.
to like the social media side. I feel like people are tired of this phony aspect that people are putting out, and that's very similar to what the church does often, as we put on this face, whereas behind closed doors we're broken and hurting. And so I think, yeah, I think our culture's ready for authenticity and reality.
Mhm.
So,
I think that's what makes this movie stand apart from others that you see, again, is because there was not a shy away from, hey, you know what? The story includes this aspect of someone living the party life, and there's a lot of hard language in that. And
mhm,
there's, this story includes drug use, and you know what? It's what happened. It's not, we're not glorifying it. We're not saying it's right. We're not condoning it even.
right,
But
right, right.
this is a true story. This is what really happened, and how you can best relate to that is by telling the truth. I think you're absolutely right in that brute honesty portrayal of the story um really made an impact. And it's also the way that it's shot is an art house film, right?
Mhm.
So watching it, you kind of tell, like I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, this is a little different than your normal movie setup, if you're talking about the major studios.
Mhm.
So talk about kind of that element, and then we'll get a little back to the storyline here.
Yeah. Kind of the word art house Christian is kind of what's been thrown around, art house Christian film. And there's a couple of elements to that, but one of them is basically the pacing of the film is, it's as if we took a documentary crew and just dropped them into the life of this woman over the course of a handful of days. And so what you're seeing is in the mundaneness of her everyday life, certain things are being triggered and brought up, that were in her past. And so because of that, there's not this huge plot moving everything forward. There's not these like checking off the boxes of a traditional storyline. It's as if, she's having to put on this front in her everyday life as things are being triggered of trauma she's had in her past. And slowly we're seeing God be with her through that and chip away and break open her heart, for an experience possibly at the end of the movie that I don't want to spoil too much. So, but Courtney even had very intentional ways in her performance that she tried to show that.
Yeah, so when we say the word slice of life, I always, I definitely remember thinking it was just very important to see her see the juxtaposition as how is she around people, and then how is she by herself, and then and I completely forgot that I even made this choice until Ben and I were talking about it. I said, "Oh yeah." I remember saying we never see Riley emotional around people. It's always when she's by herself, and then she'll never really open up, around friends. Because I said this morning, like, how many times do we go in our bathroom a mess, and then clean up, and then step out and put a smile on for the world? And then and I just felt that was very important for this story, because like you said, Ben, just a second ago, we just don't know somebody's story. We
Mm.
just don't know what they've been through. Um, and I want to touch on something that else that was said earlier, just like on how on the R rating. It's just that we hear these stories all the time of these born again Christians, and then but we don't hear the specifics of their story. Um, and not to glorify any of it. It's just a picture of what is. But how then do we honor this person's journey to where they got without incorporating the whole thing? Because we are the sum of everything that we've done and everything that has happened to us. And so in order to celebrate who that person is in this moment, we celebrate every step of the way that got them to this person. And and I just feel like this is just one of those stories. Just one of them.
Yeah, and it kind of touches too on the fact that the Christian life itself is not a it's not a golden path of roses and daisies and smells good and no problems whatsoever, right?
Right.
There's struggles that they go on even post acceptance, and you know we talk when we go through this movie, and again, I'm trying not to give away spoilers, and it's so hard. Oh, the
Dude.
worst thing you guys did to me was let me see this movie beforehand, because there's so much like I want to get into, but I don't want to spoil stuff. But she
It's
has
okay.
this
I think if we
conversation.
just keep the ending, maybe we'll just keep that ending and
Yeah,
just say something
yeah,
happens in the end, but the rest, let's chat about
yeah.
it. Feel free.
Um, so I actually find that you guys are able to drop in little moments of humor in this. And I found it humorous too, because again, everyone has their own story. Mine, I've got a backstory. Everyone's got a backstory. So when she has these moments where in her mind and it's being shown like he's right there, these
Yeah.
conversations with Jesus,
Yeah.
showing up in this, look, I'm not even the way that you're perceiving me. You realize, like, I sat there and I chuckled, of course, because it's funny, the whole honesty of I'm just this what you're making of me right now.
Mhm.
But just that she knows Jesus, like that just points right there. Like even in the darkness, even in her suffering and that sojourn and that long, seeking whatever it is she's seeking, getting it through partying and drugs. Jesus was still there, kind of convicting her mind throughout the movie, and
Right.
you see that played out.
He's still
Oh,
trying.
I love that. Yeah. And I think you even mentioned it too, Courtney, of this idea of like true love is this idea of that even when she is telling him to go away, even when she is saying in her mind, like, no joke, she tells Jesus to F off in this movie. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know if there's any, like, he literally sits down and she tells him those exact words. And it's really funny because my mom has a story that's a hard story. And she talked about how whether we want to agree, like accept it or not, we've all said that to Jesus at one point in our mind and in our life. Is there something we want to do that we know that we shouldn't? There's a path we want to head down that we know we shouldn't. And we tell Jesus, F off. I don't want you right now in my life. And that's what this film, I hope that with the way we portrayed these things, that people can come into it with an open mind and put aspects of themselves or reflect aspects of themselves in the story and say, what are those areas in my life that I'm running for God, or how has God used my story in a way that God has used her story, or can God use my story in the way that God's used this story? I'll say that's been really interesting, is as we've been kind of sending it out for people to watch. We have not gotten a ton of criticism. I'll be honest with you. There's only been a handful of criticism before they watch it. Then they watch it and they come back very inspired and excited. And one group was a group of conservative Christian women, like older conservative Christian women from the Midwest. And we let them know ahead of time, like, hey, this is R-rated, it's got language, it's raw. And they're like, I don't necessarily agree with all that. But then they watched it and they stepped away and they said, in college, I knew this person, or in college, I did this thing. And it made them feel like they could open up about their own past and their own stories. And in our Christian culture, sometimes it's hard to do that. Sometimes it's hard to be transparent because we want to put up that facade. So I hope this film can help people feel like they can share their own stories. So
And this, we also, again, we've talked about the coarse language. Now, it is, I think, important for some people to understand, this movie doesn't go into sex, nudity, violence. I mean, you really don't see too much of that. I think mom deals with boyfriends or something at one point, but it's very vague.
right.
But I think there's a lot of, I watch it and I'm like, man, there's a lot of triggering sequences
Yeah.
that go through this movie. We're talking about at the very beginning, again, spoiler alert.
You're fine. You're fine.
You have GHB,
Yeah.
being used at one point in the story. on an unsuspecting, victim. And again, with the drug use, the drug dealing, it's just I don't even know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just interesting to me that again, I went into this going, man, I don't. How are they going to pull this off?
Hmm.
Um, but you do. But the
Oh,
triggering sequences is where I was going here. Is that I know for a lot of people, they're going to sit there and be like, man, this is I haven't been able to talk about this part of my story, or
yeah.
I was impacted by this, and wow, Jesus still cares about this person.
Hmm.
What
100%.
you guys went into this telling someone else's story. What is the hope the that comes out of putting this out there?
Well, I think, there's twofold. It's like I think that there's personal connection that I hope people can walk into it, and like we said, it's a day in the life of story. It's not a huge plot driven story. There are these moments of reflection throughout the film where it's honestly just like music montages to a certain degree. And my hope with that is that as you're experiencing that, you can also be analyzing what are things in your life that you need to give up, or you need to talk about, or you needed to let go, or give to God. And so I hope that is one aspect that can happen through this film. And I think that goes for both the Christian and the non-Christian. That goes for all sides of people, as I think this film touches on so many topics that I make a joke that I think the church lady and the heathen can go into this film together and have a beautiful conversation afterwards about their own experiences. And on the flip side of that, I hope that we're seeing in Christian media things like The Chosen and Jesus Revolution and Father Stew and some of these films, The Blind, that are kind of pushing towards more authenticity in their storytelling. And so I hope that we're kind of the next step as a faith film, saying not every film should be told in this R-rated style, but maybe there are some of those stories that we should look into of sharing kind of the truth around these stories. And Courtney, yeah, you take it too. I didn't mean to
Yeah.
say that.
No, and I want to say, perhaps my hope, if it's even if it's very small, is that I just think in our world, it's just so hard to be our full self. And, just to own everything we've been through, everything we've thought, because we carry so much with us. We carry so much shame and guilt and all that. But I think it's important to own and celebrate those too.
Mm,
And so even if somebody leaves this inspired and saying, "Hey, all of these things are inside of me. I'm still lovable. I'm still
mm,
worthy of being here as
mm,
I am today."
mm,
Just because we see God and Jesus show up for this person before and during.
mm,
It's not I get righteous and then I'm only then am I worthy of being here, of being accepted. It's no, like right
mm.
now. And then that's my hope. I mean, just for this movie and beyond.
And I want to, Courtney, kind of ask you a couple questions because just a little background about how you came to be part of the film, and what your journey has been like as you got the script and you learned this character and became this character.
Ooh, yeah, other than auditioning and getting the part, I feel like the journey really started after signing on and really talking and collaborating with Ben from the ground up about what is this movie, what is it gonna be, what are his intentions, and then Ben, I forgot that weekly we would have at least an hour
Mhm.
conversation. I would pour over the script. I would go and do my thing and break it down, think about all these things, and then come up with all of these questions. And then that's one thing I'm so grateful for you, Ben, is you were just always such an open book that I could come to you with these questions. I could even challenge some things.
Mhm.
Um, to say like, hey, this is really what feels authentic and um to me. And then, I think it was particularly the way I build characters is obviously I only have my life to use to bring it to life. And then obviously a lot of research um And then, oh gosh, I'm on some kind of tangent, but I like it. And then, so one of my big takeaways, I don't even know if this is related to the question you asked. One of my big takeaways from this movie, and I think that's part of the greatest thing about being an actor is you get to be immersed, and I feel very invited into this world that I wasn't otherwise a part of, is the praise and worship music. Ben sent me all these playlists, and then from visiting Mariners and seeing this music, this people singing their hearts out, beautiful music, and it's all in the name of Jesus Christ. I still love that genre of music, and it's all because of this, of having done this role, lived in this world for X amount of time that I inhabited it.
Yeah, we talked about a
It-
lot
it's
how. Oh, sorry. Go ahead if you.
I was just gonna say it's funny that she mentioned that Courtney, you mentioned the music because I was one of those kids that was like in the church every time the doors were open. And those late 90s, early 2000s when you had that worship music. In fact, the song that's in the movie, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
give away the song, but with the hand motions, I'm sitting there doing the hand motions
Yes.
because I'm having
Yes.
flashbacks to like church camp.
Dude, there
Because
you
that's
go.
a song that we sang every week, every Wednesday, every youth group, it
Yeah.
was all the time.
Yeah.
So and it is such beautiful music when you get into worship. Ben, go ahead with what you were getting ready to
Yeah.
say.
I was just saying, like, as we were kind of talking through it, we wanted to kind of have this distinction a little bit between, like, there is, the religious organization of the church. There is the building of the church, that aspect of, I'm going to say religion, but you get what I mean. It's, you have the church organization, right? And within that can be different hypocrisies. There can be hurt feelings. It's made of people. You're going to have that. It is what it is. And there's also beautiful things that happen within that. I'm not trying just to be negative towards the church by any means. But on the flip side, there is your personal relationship with God, right? Your personal relationship with Jesus. And so even when discussing with Courtney of how we wanted to express a lot of these things, the best way that I feel like I could find that is through music and is through art. It's like that is something that I know a lot of it's tied to, like, let's say the corporate side of the church, right? But if you just strip that away and just enjoy the power of the music and the power of the art, that's when you get that feeling. And so later on in the film, when she has this, let's just say, experience of some kind, those were the kind of the emotions we were trying to pull from. Is it was apart from the organization side, that was getting down to her experiential experience with God and her relationship with God. And so that's where the best way I could express that was like, here's all these songs that move me, like, have moved me over the years, hopefully that can connect with you. And so yeah, it was a great experience.
Lots of Chris Tomlin and Matt Redman, I'm
Oh,
sure.
there you go. There you go. Hillsong, dude. Hillsong still gets me, man. They
Yeah.
still get me.
Yeah,
Oceans every time.
Oceans. Dude. Yep. Oh man. But even funny
Don't
talking
get me
about
started on
music.
music. That's what I do, and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
talk all
Talking about
day.
music and how earlier we got on, we were talking about Tooth and Nail music and Solid State, like in the early 2000s. Courtney, I'm not sure if you know too much of this, but maybe we've talked about it. In the early 2000s, there were all these Christian punk and hardcore bands that came out that were like huge. And then I'm talking like POD, Under Oath, Norma Jean,
Creed, right?
yeah.
Wasn't Creed? Creed was
Crazy.
huge.
Early 2000s, like every like great hardcore band was like a Christian band at the time. And
Even
that's the thing.
Switchfoot.
Switchfoot,
Yep.
Ryan K. You
Yeah,
had like, and that's where you had this music that was bridging that gap, right? And I'd say more on the hardcore side, you were finding music that was really raw and dark and talking about these struggles as Christians. And I remember, like, I was in like high school at the time, and it was a beautiful time to be a high schooler, is all I have to say. But I would look for Christian movies that would try to express something similar. I'm like, if you can do it in music, why can't we do it in movies? And so I literally would like go on christiancinema.com and just buy all of these Christian movies and watch them. And I would be so disappointed each time. And not that they're all bad. I'm not trying to, like, again, kind of poop on all those, but they just weren't hitting what I was getting from that, like, raw, like, Christian punk rock, Christian hardcore, all of that stuff. And so, for me, I've had this passion of how do we bring that to film? How do we bring that to cinema? Because there are so many young Christian filmmakers I know, or young Christians who are filmmakers, who want to share stories of faith in this authentic way, and they're terrified because they're worried they're going to get ripped apart. They're worried that they're going to be judged on either side, and they just honestly don't feel like there's a space for them. And so they just don't tell fake stories, as they just tell any other story, and they don't touch on that.
We
And
were scared too.
exactly. And for us, if you're asking the truth, I'm terrified for our movie to come out in the next couple of weeks. But thankfully, we've been getting great reviews. I'm very proud of what we did. I feel like the Holy Spirit led us every step of the way. But yeah, I mean, my mom is inviting all of her church ladies to come to the screening in Indiana, and she's let them know what it is. And I'm just like, Lord, help their hearts to be prepared for what this movie is, because it's different than what I think has come in the past. So
and it hits in a way where it again, we talk about that struggle and the reality of it, but it hits in a way where it's not overpowering, it's not overbearing of there's a lot of emotion, but it's not an overbearing, or I want to say off-putting almost
oh, good, yeah.
way. So, because you watch some movies and it's just like they pour on the emotion and you're just like wrecked throughout the whole movie. This, it's not lighter, but it's just
It
real.
lets up.
I mean, the best way to put it, it is definitely real, because it's not all, yeah, you may be in the dark moments, but those dark moments aren't just full of dread and that stuff there. There's lighter moments in that darkness. And I think you guys did a great job of even showing that part of it where, yeah, she's searching, she's lost, but, still there's this like slight optimism that goes throughout the movie that you can sense.
That's great.
Wow.
I love that.
Wow.
Even
It's
we were
just-
talking too, like how her friends, we didn't want to make anybody fully a villain in the film. We wanted there to always be an upswing for people. And so, we have her friend Tim is one of my favorite characters in the movie, but their little banter together is so fun, and he brings a lot of levity. But you also see that there's this parasitic type relationship where he wants drugs, she has the drugs. So you're sitting here wondering how much of the friendship is just him using her to get free drugs. But then also he saved her from two predators at a bar, so he cares about her. And so that's something we really wanted to try to show, is not was it paint anybody one dimensional, but show some layers to everybody. Even her stepdad, I was kind of yells at her at one point for coming home drunk, and we didn't want to leave it where her dad was just mean and walks away, but he apologizes for going too far at one point. So we wanted to make people real people in the film, and hopefully that's kind of what you're talking about. Is it isn't just like, oh, she's with these bad guys who do bad things all the time. It's like, no, they also care for each other sometimes, and sometimes they have deep conversations.
She had a support system throughout, whether it was a positive support system or a negative support system. There were people that supported her either way.
Yep. No, 100%.
So that, I mean, and that again, just what makes this just kind of a very unique story. I definitely see this definitely is a movie about seeking fulfillment, I think, and redemption. I really was sitting there going, this is a prodigal story. If the prodigal son parable was made into a movie, this would be a great example of that, I think.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Man.
And I think
and that prodigal element.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that prodigal element is just so emotionally charged. That relationship between mother and daughter.
Dude,
that's such a beautiful take on it, because I think just this idea of coming home, the prodigal son comes home, and after this journey, after, and then what is that moment of coming home?
Right. And that leads up to the ending, which we will not discuss here because we want people to see it for themselves.
There you
but
go.
You're absolutely right. The whole movie is kind of that prodigal story. You see someone who finally gets out of the house. It wasn't hit on too much, but it felt like, or sounded like, she was in college. In the situation she was in. So she's away at college and just living the life, drugs, party, all that stuff, almost carefree with what she was doing. Didn't care, I guess, is the better way of putting it. And you see those elements in there, to that slow return back to, hey, I need something more. Like, this isn't doing it for me.
Well, and that was one of the goals, is like, with that ending too, and I'll try not to, I'll just say she has a spiritual experience. She sees where there's another road she can take in her life, and whether she chooses to take that or not is kind of left up to the audience to a certain degree. But that was something that we really wanted to show, was have it be authentic all the way through, and have the audience be where you're seeing these things not fulfill her. Just even there's a beautiful scene where her friends are looking for her drugs, and she brings in her drugs, and they're all doing it, and you can just see she's so unhappy. They build up to this party, and you can just see she's not fulfilled in this party. So these things that she's been using to kind of medicate and distract from her past aren't working anymore, and all of it is starting to bubble up. And so for us, it got to this point where I really wanted the audience to sit here, whether you're a Christian or not, and say, I don't want to see this character go back to this life, because there's nothing for her in this life. So I don't care if it's God, if it's going to AA, or celebrate recovery, or whatever it is. I don't want to see this character go back towards this life, so that anyone who sits in the theater and watches that could hopefully be excited and celebrate, and hope that she makes a different choice than what she's been making. I think often in Christian content, we assume that everybody watching it thinks that becoming a Christian is a good thing, or they think that having that belief is a good thing, and so we don't earn it. And I often in our faith stories, because we're kind of speaking to ourselves. And so with this film, I really wanted to make sure we earned whatever decision she makes at the end. I'll put it that way. So
Decision or not.
Or not. Oh, dun, dun, dun. Yes, good job. But honestly, I'll shoot this over to Courtney. Is I think a big aspect of that was all of the actors we kind of met, and we were going to go over the script, but we sat down for a few hours, and we honestly all just shared our Christian experiences growing up, or our religious experiences, wherever anyone came from. We talked about the pros and the cons of what we had felt. We talked about where we are now, and everybody's in a different place. And then we talked about the goal of the film was, at the end of the testimony I filmed, the character, the real life story said, I felt fully seen, fully known, and fully loved. And I was like, that's where we want to get to. And so our actors on set, man, you guys were just they were all spiritually open. There was no ego. And Courtney, you can speak to that to a certain degree, but there's that couch scene where a worship song may be played. And I had my camera assistant come to me, and he's like, something's happening here, man. Something's happening here. And that's where they were so spiritually open that the Holy Spirit just, or creativity, or however you want to put it, just poured out of them for some of these moments. So Courtney, how did you get to that place?
Ooh, see, that's so funny. People ask me that. And then, so you do all this prep work, and you do all this homework, and then you think so much about the character and the story, and, what we're all doing here, this, what's the big idea of this whole movie? And I think all that, but then moments before the camera roll, you have to let it all go. And for the lack of a better phrase, say a prayer. That's it. And then, so, it's always funny because it's like, Courtney, how'd you do it? In those moments, I don't know. In those moments, I hope, but then there's some other thing that you have to let operate. So it's just so funny that you say that something else is happening, just because I think a lot of the, any prep toward getting creative is just getting your vessel open enough to allow something else to steer you. And so in a way, maybe that's how I do it, is I just get, at the end of the day, you just get out of the way to allow that other thing to work through you. And, and then at the end of the day, you're just so grateful and blessed that you can do that you can be the thing that something else can operate on, for something else to happen that's bigger than you.
I love it. Awesome.
I love that. That just kind of before the cameras roll, just say a prayer. I've done radio off and on since college. My first go around at college, and that first time I was there, I was on a student station, right? And 2 hours on a Saturday, just had my own little live show DJing, just jogging. And one of the interesting things I learned over that semester was the Saturdays I went in, and maybe I was running behind, maybe I was just busy, I just ran in and was just fumbling around with everything. It was a wreck. It was just the whole 2 hours was just, there was mistakes, there was hot mics left on. It was bad. But the Saturdays I was able to come in and just say a simple, just little prayer and just let go and let God. Those were some of the best, smoothest shows that I had, and it showed through because I think that's a huge takeaway too. Is when you let the Spirit just kind of flow, when you let God in and say, "Hey, I give up control. Here you go." Something beautiful is going to happen, and in those moments, especially with worship, there's a psychological effect in worship that happens. Um, some will call it spiritual, and sometimes, sure. A lot of it's psychological because of the music, because of the tone, because of, we're releasing and we're that meditation that happens within. And I love it. Anytime you get something like that happens, you hear so much from um artists that perform on tour. They say the same thing, man, when we forget to pray, when we forget to give glory to God, everything goes wrong. But when we take those few moments to remember him and to bring him into it, everything just happens to, go the way it's supposed to.
Something I'm hearing from that story you just said about being in the booth and DJing, and I think it's so parallel to our movie is, we need those stumbles to appreciate when we're flying,
Mhm.
and then for Reily, perhaps she needed this stumble, this moment to appreciate when it's like when she can, get out of her own way.
How much, you did a lot of prep work for this film. Yeah, how much did you actually get to interact with the person who this story is based on? Did you at all?
I have never met her. We follow each other on Instagram now. But yeah, it is funny that I've never met her, but I feel like I've been in her life. I lived her life. And I lived a hold on. I lived a poetic photographic version of her life. So I mean I look forward, maybe she'll hopefully be at
Yeah,
a screening and maybe
I know that would be
I'll finally
great.
get to meet her. The
Yeah,
legend.
basically, yeah, basically, I filmed her testimony, and then I had her and her husband came over to me and my wife's house, and we recorded. We sat down with her for 4 hours, and she just vomited everything out, all these stories. Like there's a moment where so she deals drugs in the film, and her dealer just drops off a bag of goodies, I'll put it that way, and runs away. And she's just telling this as if it was like a normal Tuesday, just no big deal. This happened. And I'm just like, this is insane that this is your story. And so she basically has been I've sent her the script. She's approved, every draft of the script. I've sent her every cut of the film, so she's seen every cut of the film. But she basically just was like, make it your own. And she gave us the freedom just to be like, when I was writing the script, she's like, I've fully accepted that this isn't like my story anymore. This is what you are choosing to express out of my story, and just kind of let us run with it. And so she gave some feedback along the way. There were a couple of drafts in the script where you were talking about even how there's no sexuality in the film. We don't deal with relationships and all that. And we had written kind of a love triangle in the film. And she honestly hadn't called us out on many things, but that was the one time she was like, this would never have happened. So if we could just she's like, you can keep it in if you want, but just know that that's not the honest version of my story. And so if you watch the film, there's a character Lance in the film that they kind of have this couch scene that's a little bit intimate, not in a relationship way, but that was meant to kind of lead into a romantic way in the film. And she just said, please, she's like, she didn't say, please take it out, but she was just like, that isn't honest. And so we took that out, and she agreed that she's like, I would have had this deep conversation with a friend, and this feels more authentic to who I was and what I went through. And so yeah, she's just kind of let us run with it and been totally cool with every step of the way. And what we tried to do so it still feels honest, because obviously you're compacting all of this time into a 90-minute movie. Like for instance, the big party that they throw in the film in college, she threw a big party in high school. So then she had gotten the drugs in college, and we're like, oh, that leads naturally up to, we've got a bag of drugs, that'll lead naturally to them throwing a big party. And so then taking some of her friends and compacting them a little bit. But through that 4-hour session, I can honestly say every scene we can point back to one of her stories,
Mhm.
that would make it honest, because I didn't want to manufacture stuff for it. If it's like, if we're going to be honest, we need to be honest all the way through. So
I certainly think that's going to work in your favor too. By the fact that you did keep it honest, it flows through. And again, having watched it myself, I I have no problem with the fact that the love triangle got cut,
Good.
because that moment that we talk about on the couch, was so almost pure. In the middle of this
Right.
mess, you have this beautiful moment of unintended worship, of unintended, oh, God's all right, you let me in, here I am. You
Hmm.
know, the tagline that we have is, "You're never too far that God won't chase you."
Hmm.
Where did that come from? Because I love that quote.
Honestly, I had to make a new trailer, and so I dropped that in there because I wanted to express it to people that that's what this story is about. And a big thing is, even with us making it R-rated, the goal is not to make a quote unquote edgy Christian film. That's what sometimes people try to put us in that box or see it as, like we're trying to use the R rating as like a selling tactic, when like we've gotten, like, it would have been easier for us to sell this film as a PG-13. The R rating is something we had to fight for every step of the way to keep it that way. And so that, I felt like that tagline really hopefully sets people up to know we're going to go to some dark places. But those dark places, the whole point isn't to say, oh, we're these cool kids using the F word in our Christian movie. It's saying God will step into the darkness for you. You're never too far that God won't chase you into that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, and then I've mentioned this. It's there's a way there's a really thin line between provocative and shock value.
Mm,
And
Mhm.
just doing edgy things to do them because we're some sort of adolescent rebellion. And then that, I don't think that's, the level of art that we're trying to do,
yeah.
because I
Yeah.
feel like I always say that to be provocative means to actually get people to think in a productive way. And does that mean sometimes pushing some boundaries? Does that mean sometimes pushing ourselves into discomfort and other people watching it into some discomfort? Yeah, because if it starts a productive conversation, that's what I think it means to be provocative or edgy, for the lack of better word. I mean, edgy meaning push the edge, you know, to really
In
accomplish
this
something.
film, I agree with you guys. Like, I wouldn't even call this edgy. You guys, I don't think, tried to push the boundaries. You guys portrayed real life. I think pushing the boundaries would be, hey, this is something that's questionable for Christians, but we're going to try to make it okay. That wasn't done here at all. You guys are portraying real life and showing a conversion story, or a possible conversion story. Again, we'll leave it to the audience. Um, but I agree absolutely. Like, this is not an edgy film. Yes, there's reality in it, and yes, there's coarse language throughout, and yes, there's drugs. But
Mhm.
we live in the real world. We're Christians that live in the real world. And I think this movie is, certainly not just for those who are church. I think this is in my notes too somewhere if I took a second to look. This movie's not, it's for the church and the unchurched. But I really think the people who are unchurched, or the people who are lost or struggling, or having already been hurt by religion, or judgmental people in the church, like, excuse me, I've been impacted by things like that, and I could certainly see where someone who has that free, supposition about the church being just full of judgmental people who will never accept them, going, God is going to accept you no matter what, and the right people are going to be brought into your life. I think this movie is really going to hit home with a lot of people who are struggling.
Mm. Well, and that's the thing, is the big phrase right now on social media, the whole deconstruction movement. You have a lot of people deconstructing from the faith and sharing those stories. You even have a lot of, like, a lot of those tooth and nail bands we're talking about, back in the day, or you see worship leaders or different people come out and deconstruct from these things. And that's where it's like, I hope also our film can let those people feel seen and heard, and sit here and say, we understand where you're coming from. We understand why you're feeling this way, why you've gone through this process, but you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can still pursue a relationship with Jesus, or still pursue a relationship with God. despite that experience that you had, that negative experience you had with the church. And I think we're seeing this beauty of, and I think Courtney, this even goes with the authenticity thing you were talking about earlier as a culture, is I think you're seeing people step away and go into college, maybe become more atheistic in their thinking for a season. And then they hit their mid-20s or 30s and they start to open themselves up to spirituality again. They believe there's more than just what is seen. And so if we can be a film that helps them open that up again quicker or explore that, I think that can be powerful all around. So
Yeah, and there's something that you just said. I mean, that we've just all we've done is we've taken a picture of reality. And then been asking this question. I mean, is taking a picture of something its glorification? I don't know. I don't think so. Just because here's another thing I've been saying is that I think the Christian community is hungry, or this was at least our hypothesis, and we were hoping for this, is hungry for something like this, or for something a little bit more real, because it's just hard with social media. Reality's there. It's harder. It's becoming more difficult to hang on to this idea of perfection. And then more and more, I think, as a culture, and even in the Christian community itself, it's like we're even questioning, why are we hanging on to this idea of perfection? Why are we doing this to ourselves? And then I've always said this about, I just feel like the Christian community is so beautiful. Just this belief system, it just empowers people to just go and do the most beautiful things, the most beautiful selfless things. And I ultimately think this movie is a celebration of that. And but also saying, how can we be better? How can we do this better? How can we evolve and grow?
Even what I like too is that when she has this maybe euphoric type moment, it's her getting out of her Western Christian environment and experiencing a different culture as well. It's like, working for a church. I've been to churches all, in different countries, but I've been in services with different people from all over the world, and the beauty of the body of Christ and how everybody is different and they have a different angle, and just how sometimes that shakes you up on areas that you may have been stagnant on, or it calls you out in some areas that you may have, kind of hid away or not think were a big deal. And so there's so beauty. Like when I was in Egypt, I'm telling you, the way Egyptians pray is, it is prayer with expectation, full on expectation that God is going to move. And then I think about my kind of lazy prayers where I'm just like, Lord, help me not get a parking spot at this restaurant. You know what I mean? Which is like, it's not going to happen. And so that was something that I loved about this story, is that in reality, she had to get out of that environment she was in, both the negative drug environment and kind of the hypocritical, what she viewed as hypocritical religious environment, in America, in the Western church. And she goes to a different culture. And that's when her heart starts to even open up more to this idea: is God moving in my life? Is he calling me to something else? So
Yeah, I mean, the big, and again, I have a couple pages of notes, but I put it in bold even on this, and it basically at the bottom there it says, "Does it glorify God?" Is something that I wrote down as I typed up my notes, because Lord knows we can't read my handwriting. So I typed them up, and when I got to that one, because I wrote it out separately from everything else as I watched the film, and that was all right, we have all of this, and it goes back to a lot of the points that we've made throughout this conversation, but it's like, does it glorify God? If that's what this story's doing, what do I care about the language? What do I care about the drug use? We care because it's the true story. But if it's all to the end of glorifying God, I think that is a much greater purpose in, telling these types of stories. We also we're talking about the language, and trying not to be it wasn't gratuitous what you said, but we were talking about being provocative and getting people to think, but that shock value. I think when I hear shock value, I always think of shock comics,
oh
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
a term that, from the talking early 2000s, we had quite a few shock comics come up, and their whole thing was, I'm going to say something so ridiculous and so offensive that people are going to laugh or people are going to pay attention to me, either or. And this is opposite of that completely. You know, we're not doing it for the sake of doing it. We're doing it to tell the story, and that story brings us to one of the other single lines that I wrote down, and that was hope.
Mm.
You know, throughout. I mean, even I think it was the beginning of the movie. She wrecks her friend's bike in this very, you know, for me, it was a very interesting scene and sequence of events that happened, and kind of the beginning of the end for her as she is wrestling with God and wrestling with this idea of her pain, and just, I think, being done with feeling the way she did while she, you know, still going throughout the movie. But hope is a big part of this film.
I love that. Oh, I'm glad you said, because we go to
I
such dark places, man, that it's like you hope that people still see that there's light at the end of the tunnel, that there's another direction, another option, and that it's not, you know, she doesn't have to stay in this place. She doesn't have to continue in this life. It's God slowly chipping away at her heart or opening her eyes throughout this process of there can be a different path for you. There can be a different direction to go. I love that. That's amazing to hear.
and then may I be so bold to hold tight to that we just took a picture. And then because Ben and I, you know, part of my favorite thing about this movie that we've done is just to make a movie ultimately with no agenda. And so with with does it glorify God? Is God just already glorious and we just took a picture of it? And then there's no agenda in that. You know, did we just take a picture?
Well, and even going into it, the way that I was trying wanted to express, and kind of, I think, and I may have already told you this too, Courtney, in the beginning, was it was like, why can't we just tell like how any, I'm gonna say secular, I don't like to know that word necessarily, but like a secular story, just like a or what I tell people, I used to say, no, it's like a normal movie that tells about someone's faith journey, just like a normal movie would. And they're like, so it's a Christian movie. And I'm like, well, yeah, but it's like
Yes.
a normal movie that's just like if any other filmmaker would make a normal movie, and it's about one girl's journey of faith. And I think that's where it's so tricky, is like, you know, even the Christian art house term that we're trying to like coin a little bit, it's because we keep getting put in this box. And so I just hope that when people go see it, just take those expectations away, because if you're expecting on either side, if you're a Christian going into it or a non-Christian expecting to go in and see God's Not Dead, or going in to see, you know, Fireproof, it's like our movie is so in every single way different from these types of film, and the way we shot the film and the way we lit the film and performances and dialogue, storytelling, pacing, it is all completely different than those. So the people, I think, that come into it with just this very open mindset are really enjoying the film. And then any critical notes, I feel like, are when people come in expecting a Kirk Cameron movie. And we keep along the way trying to be like, no, 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 like this is as if a normal movie was discussing someone's faith journey. And if you go into that like a normal secular movie, I think that's where people are getting really excited about it and being moved by it.
I gotta say, I absolutely agree with that. I'm just, like, sitting here nodding my head, like, yeah, because I've watched the movies that you just referenced, and I've had the privilege of meeting Kurt years and years ago during Left Behind.
Oh, nice.
And
that first one is
you know,
banging, dude. That first one's great. Still, I hold to that. I hold to that. But
I will
anyways,
tell you the short version of the story is I grew up off Lake Erie, and they were shooting majority of that film in Toronto.
ooh,
So it was about 90 minutes away for us, and our local radio station took a couple busloads of us. Somehow they had a connection of people to be extras. So
ooh,
in the
fun.
big airport scene where they're at O'Hare, most of those people are like, I can sit there and point out, be like, oh, I know them. I know them. I was too young. I was already taken. So unfortunately, I didn't make the cut, but I
Oh
did get to
no,
meet certain cast members, and it was an amazing time. But
that's
you're
awesome.
right, where this film, it does not feel like the Kirk Cameron Christian movie or the Kevin Sorbo Christian movie. This is a normal feel. I don't want to say normal, but
It's so
secular. I don't want to say
It's
that.
so hard
You're
because
right. Like,
yeah.
it's a regular movie. It tells a faith journey.
Right,
And I
right.
get where, everyone especially in the industry are like, they have a formula and they want the formula to work. Like, don't get outside the formula, but you obliterated the formula.
It's
Well,
not
that's
how it's
honest.
spelled. Yeah.
Yeah, we honestly, and I met with some Christian producers. We've met with quite a few in the industry. And I don't want to rag on people too much, but because everyone is called to do their own thing, and I completely understand that. We're coming out with something that's completely out of left field for what they do, and I completely get that. But what got me was we met with one, and they were like, "You need to have a book that you sell with it." And you need to have this thing that you sell with it, and you need to have this thing that you do with it, and this movement behind it. And I was like, but I just don't feel called to do that. I feel like our goal is how Courtney will say it's one person's faith journey. And we're just showing the realities of that journey and then allowing people to walk away and take whatever they want from that experience. And hopefully it's hope. Hopefully it's glorifying God. Hopefully it's giving people purpose. But we were telling one person's faith journey. And the hope is that if this is successful and people want to see more stories like this, that you could just tell those one person's journey without any propaganda behind it, without any book that needs to be sold, without having to try. And not that those things, I'm not trying to say those are all bad, because I've seen those
Right.
work and I think they can be beautiful. I'm not trying to rag on those at all. I'm just saying that's not what we were called to do. And I think there's space for films like this. They're just one person's powerful faith journey told in a real way. So,
And that was the thing too, was one person's faith journey. When it said, based on a true story, what do you think I went to look for first when I was doing my research?
Who is
I
that?
was looking for a book. I was looking for,
really?
who is this about? I was looking for, and of course you're saying all that too. I just squirrel moment here. You're talking about them wanting, you gotta sell a book, you gotta do this. All I can think about is Mel Brooks being yogurt, going
Yes,
merchandising,
yogurt.
merchandising.
Yes,
And
yes. Baseball's merchandise. Yes, absolutely.
right. But you're right. Like, that's what caught me off guard too, was in my job when I do an interview, I try to research. I want to know about, like Courtney and you've been, and looking up, all right, what, past credits and where they come from, what is this all about, and who is this about? And I was like, oh, this is not this isn't like based on a celebrity. This isn't based
Mhm.
on someone who's written a book and done TED Talks or done, all these other motivational speeches. This is an everyday person, and we're just telling her story.
Right.
And it's such a great way, because you guys went in no agenda, um, trying not to fit that Christian movie mold. Um, really brave, for you guys to set out and do that. And I'm super excited that we're now, what, 2 weeks away from opening.
Yeah, March 15th is our opening weekend. And the whole thing, if we can push to your audience or beg them to go see this movie, is that first weekend we have, was it the 15th, 16th, and 17th? It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll have show times. They should be up on Fandango here the next week, hopefully a couple of days, but it might be a week. And basically, if we're successful that first weekend, they will expand us to more showings, more theaters, more times. And so right now we're starting in 25 cities. And then hopefully people will flock to those, and word of mouth will spread, and then it will grow to more cities and more cities. We even have an area on our website. It's pastorskidthemovie.com that you can go and check the Fandango to see if your city's on there, and some suggestions for demand to get in your area. Because it sounds silly, but say you're at the movie theater going to see Dune 2 in the next couple of weeks. Go up to the manager and say, is Pastor's Kid going to be here? Is Pastor's Kid going to be here? Bug them, because it means something. It really does. When you go up to the managers and you say, I want this movie, it shows that there's a demand for it. So yeah, I'm terrified and so excited at the same time. Honestly, doing these podcasts has been super, so exciting just to see everybody's reactions to this film. So yeah.
So pastorskidthemovie.com, and that's also where you can find the backstory, the true story, the testimony,
Yeah.
of the actual person whose this story is based on,
And we put
as well as
spoiler
some
warning on
other
there.
like vignettes, right?
Yep. We have a lot of other little pieces, so some behind the scenes stuff. So yeah.
So yeah, check it out, guys. Pastor's Kid released March 15th. So coming up in a couple weeks, pastorkidthemovie.com. Ben, Courtney, thank you guys so much for joining me here on the Word and Praise
Oh, thank you
podcast.
for
I
having me.
really appreciate it. Hopefully we get a chance to talk again. on the next movie, or as we
Yeah.
move forward with this one.
Absolutely.
Um,
That'd be
man,
amazing.
you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.